On the battlefield of nature, skin has evolved weapons for predation, armor for protection, and the means to move. From fish to dinosaurs to us. This is the incredible untold story of the organ that makes it all possible: skin. The shark is famous as the killer of the seas. Its jaws and teeth are the stuff of legend. But the shark can't deliver its bite without its amazing speed in water. Even its skin is deadly.
If you look at the structure of the teeth and the scales, they're almost identical. What we call dermal denticles, or skin teeth, that form the entire outer layer of the skin of the shark.
The shark's skin is razor sharp, built in a tight diamond pattern, so hydrodynamic that it's the basis for the advanced competitive swimsuit design, and so sharp that if a predator tries to attack a shark from behind, it will be badly cut. There are few creatures that can fight the shark, but there are some that can hide. To avoid vicious predators like sharks, the octopus changes its shape, color, and texture in an instant to look like rock and algae.
In this evolutionary arms race between predator and prey, you have this magnificent skin being evolved, and it's in response to the visual predators that are out there.
Skin for predation. Skin for escape. Just two of the phenomenal abilities evolved by the massive organ that seems to be a simple barrier to the outside world.
We don't tend to think about skin as an organ, but it is. Unlike a heart or a liver, it's an organ that is spread over the exterior of our body. And we see skin performing many important functions for animals, from species recognition to mating behavior to protection from predators and from the environment.
Skin has evolved countless different ways across the animal spectrum, becoming nails, fur, hooves, and horns. Skin has evolved to meet the different needs of different species.
This is an amazing course of evolution, that the rudimentary cells in skin have evolved in their own course to provide, in some animals, hair, in some feathers, and in others, scales.
But for the first 200 million years of animal evolution, the story of skin was confined to the seas. Scientists believe that the first skin-like structure to appear belonged to some of the earliest animals to exist on Earth.
Jellyfish are thought to have emerged something of the order of 700 million years ago.
Peter Anderson studies jellyfish to find clues about how skin first evolved. The jellyfish was one of the first creatures to be able to move freely in the water, encased in a single layer of cells that worked together to protect and respond to the world outside. It was also one of the first creatures to use a protective layer as an attack weapon. Sting cells sense nearby prey and lash out in an instant.
The sting cell provides the animal with a great ability to capture food and to defend itself, and that has allowed them to survive so successfully.
But the jellyfish does not have a true skin. What we recognize as skin began with vertebrate fish. Fish grew a two-layer covering over 500 million years ago. From the start, these first creatures with backbones were a success, and eventually evolved into a world of animals with backbones, including human beings.
As far as we know, this evolutionarily novel structure, this two-layered skin, first appeared in the earliest fishes. The skin of vertebrates is a unique kind of structure.
John Long is a professor of biological sciences at Vassar College.
Fish skin is made up of two very distinctive tissue layers, the epidermis and the dermis.
The tough epidermis on the surface, like the jellyfish exterior, forms a barrier to the outside world. But the supple dermis that lies just beneath makes all the difference. This amazingly fertile system of cells would anchor the roots of many different skin structures. The first of them was fish scales. Scales arose during a time of vicious predation in the seas. The Cambrian, killers like Anomalocaris, and the giant Ducalosteus sliced through defenseless prey. And even if dunk was avoided, smaller fish battled in their own weight class. Some fish needed body armor just to have a chance at survival.
What's interesting about fish skin is that the scales, in fact, are made of some of the same materials that bone and structures in our teeth are made out of. And the result is that fish have a strong, sturdy layer, essentially of bone.
This scale comes from the bottom layer of the skin, from the dermis.
Scales grow in a tight pattern, overlapping like shingles on a roof.
Each one of these scales pulls off, and look at the size of that. So there's a lot of overlap there.
But not all scales are alike.
The scales on fishes are really variable. Some fishes, like catfish, have no scales at all. And then there are other fish that look like they're wearing a coat of armor. What this says to us is that evolution has acted repeatedly on fish skin, depending on the ecology of different kinds of fishes.
A fish's environment and the predators within it help dictate the evolution of its skin. And most fish, scaled or not, would evolve another strategy for survival.
One of the things that people get all excited about when they pick up a fish is how slimy they are. Fish produce mucus.
The slippery mucus rises from the glands in the dermis and keeps the fish free from clinging parasites. It helps to quickly heal wounds, sometimes contains toxins to discourage predators, and even may help the fish swim faster by reducing turbulence. For the fish, slime is good. The basic fish skin system of epidermis and dermis, plus a coating of mucus, and often scales, once evolved, worked so well that it remains in place to this day. After over 200 million years of evolution, descendants of the first fish ventured up on land and found fewer predators and plentiful food. But this new environment was harsh. If they were to survive here, they would have to evolve a far tougher skin.
When you're living in an aquatic, a watery environment, the skin can be a little bit more giving. The minute you come up onto land, you've got some real major things you've got to overcome.
Throughout the history of the vertebrates, skin has always had the basic function that it keeps the internal environment constant, even though there are changes outside the animal. But when vertebrates came up on land, there was a new requirement on skin, and that was to avoid drying out. And so the skin that fish have isn't sufficient.
We went from skin that was wet all the time to skin that had to be dry.
Land held promise if skin could evolve. 360 million years ago, smooth-skinned tetrapods crawled out of the sea onto land. These four-limbed creatures evolved from scaleless fish. They would be the common ancestor of all reptiles, amphibians, birds, and mammals. Their transition to life on land would not have been possible without the evolution of new adaptations to their skin.
You've got to remember first that they came from an aquatic environment.
Land is rough and dry, and the first of these four-legged creatures had thin, highly permeable skin. They could not survive long as they crawled across solid ground.
It was skin which had to be kept moist, which meant the animals had to return to water regularly. If it dried out, the animal would die.
As some animals spent more time out of the water, they evolve a tougher outer layer. A protein, long present in fish skin, would supply it. It's called keratin.
Keratin was the absolute key to success, the key innovation that made life on land possible and versatile.
Anthropologist Nina Jablonski studies skin.
Keratin is one of these wonderful molecules in evolution that is used over and over and over again in different places. Our hair is made of keratin. Nails are made of keratin. The claws of other animals, including birds, are made of keratin. Keratin is found in the horn of the rhinoceros and in the hooves of hooved mammals. It's all over the place.
Keratin grows in dense packs of cells, and it toughens the skin surface. Keratin is skin's moldable plastic. Depending on how it combines with other elements, it can appear in many forms. It can be soft, like plastic wrap, or hard, like plastic cups, but it always provides a durable barrier.
This is the amazing thing about evolution, is that you can take a very basic kind of structure and tweak it a little bit here and tweak it a little bit there to have it serve different functions.
Scientists think that keratin first appeared in the skin of amphibians in places where it was most needed, like the foot pads, where rubbing and abrasion were most likely to occur. When reptiles evolved, their keratin morphed further. Gradually, it spread across the entire reptile's skin, providing increased protection and better survival. Armed with hides full of keratin, the age of reptiles was on.
Excellent.
Physiological ecologist Bill Lutterschmidt studies reptile anatomy, specifically snakes, with Melissa Miller.
Reptiles have evolutionarily changed their skin to be much more of a barrier to the environment.
Reptiles evolve scales to help them cope with an abrasive terrain.
Scales are really modified little appendages of skin.
Fish scales, anchored in the dermis, were well suited to swimming. But on rough land, they would tear out. Amazingly, reptiles developed scales that anchored onto each other at the surface, connected as tightly as the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle.
If we look at scales in a typical reptile, what we see is that the skin layers are just sort of folded into this funny, beautiful little pleat on the surface.
And there's another benefit to this new scaly skin.
It imparts tremendous mobility so that an animal that has scales can be extremely mobile as well as have very abrasion-resistant skin.
And a mobile snake is a deadly snake that can also flee its enemies. But reptiles face another enemy on land, the blazing sun. Even a single crack in the tough keratin scales exposes the animal's cold-blooded interior to dry heat, evaporation, and death.
In order for reptiles to leave a fully aquatic environment, they needed to have evolved a skin that was much less permeable to water.
So what is the secret ingredient that keeps snake skin super tight? To find the answer, Melissa Miller focuses on two very similar and very poisonous snakes that have natural habitats close to one another, but yet adopt different lifestyles. The land-loving copperhead and the semi-aquatic cottonmouth.
We feel that some of their differences in habitat selection may be tied to the physiology of their skin.
When the cottonmouth ancestors went back into the water, they may have lost some of the adaptations in their skin. By comparing two different snake skins, Miller hopes to reveal the key ingredient that's allowed some reptiles to have watertight skin and enable them to live away from the water. Snakes famously shed their skin. The scales are so tightly interlocked that they allow no room for growth, and they break down from wear and tear. So, 4 to 8 times a month, a snake will loosen the worn-out layer at one end, often by rubbing against a rock, and crawl straight out of it, much like taking off a sock. Back in the lab, Lutterschmidt and Miller want to compare how waterproof the two snakeskin sheds are.
In Melissa's experiments, she takes shed scans and looks at the amount of water that is lost through those sheds over time.
The test is simple. They place the sheds over test tubes filled with water. After a week, the land-based copperhead skin keeps almost all the water in. The water-loving cottonmouth has lost most of his.
The copperhead has a less permeable skin because you can see there's more water left in the sample.
Their sheds have roughly equal amounts of skin-tight keratin. So what is it that makes the copperhead so waterproof? It is a liquid fat called a lipid.
These lipids are extremely important because they provide sort of natural water resistance, water repellents.
Lipids are a key component in skin's evolution. In reptiles, it seals any cracks between scales, forming a sun-proof seal. These animals would then dare venture freely over land without fear of drying out. It gave them the tenacity to push further inland and dominate the earth.
It's like having a raincoat on that has a really good water repellent surface. The lipids and the keratin work together on the very surface of the skin to create a tight water-resistant layer.
The copperhead has much more lipids than the cottonmouse, which is why it can inhabit a more arid land-based area.
Lipids seem to serve a major role in the amount of terrestrial behavior we see in many reptiles.
The combination of keratin and lipids set the pattern for the reptile's success.
This was important because it allowed them to spend much more time on land, and it allowed them to get away from the water and move into environments that before weren't available.
With the right ingredients, evolution has provided reptiles with tough, water-resistant skin. These reptiles dared to roam freely across all of Pangaea, the one supercontinent on Earth. And as Pangaea splits apart over millions of years, their skin evolves further, adapting to changing environments. Their descendants, the mighty dinosaurs, would be the dominant vertebrates for 160 million years.
Dinosaurs were a really successful group that radiated, diversified, evolved into many different forms.
Is it possible that the secrets of dinosaur domination lie in its skin? We now know that dinosaurs dominated life on Earth for 160 million years. Their skin, the barrier between these huge land animals and their environment, had to play a major role in their success. But it has been hard to study.
We're used to finding the bones of dinosaurs. Soft tissues are much rarer, and you're left with what effectively is an echo, and that is what we're usually left with to study the dinosaurs.
Because soft tissue doesn't last, scientists usually have to rely on the information they can extract from the bones to tell them about the skin. And the bones do have stories to tell. In them lies evidence that in the age of dinosaurs, what was needed for survival was armor for defense, weaponry for predation, and enough protection to survive long-distance travel.
We see huge variations from one species of dinosaur to another.
And skin is where these major adaptations for survival occur.
Stegosaurus was a plant-eating dinosaur, and we know that from the very small teeth that it had.
Paleontologist Ken Carpenter excavated the most complete Stegosaurus skeleton ever found in 1992.
These plates are very large, triangular structures, and they were covered with skin.
These tough, sturdy plates were defensive armor, evolved as deterrents to meat-eating predators.
We think that Allosaurus may have, in fact, been the top predator for Stegosaurus. We know that because of the evidence that we find of tooth marks on Stegosaurus bones. We also have evidence that Stegosaurus did defend itself against the Allosaurus because we have Allosaurus bones that show punctures from the spike of the Stegosaurus.
The Stegosaurus's tail spike was an early proof of the modern adage, the best defense is a good offense. These hard structures found on the outside of plant-eating dinosaurs are heavy outgrowths of skin made of the dense protein keratin. Just like with reptiles, the keratin on its skin would help it ensure its survival. Over time, this tough skin is reinforced by bone that grows right in the skin. Nature's innovation called ossification.
This spike actually formed within the skin, and it was probably covered by a material much like our fingernail.
Ossification can still be seen today in the tough skin of alligators and crocodiles, some of the closest living relatives of the dinosaurs.
Something like an old crocodile has bony plates, way over 1 centimeter thick, covering most of its body. And these plates, in turn, are covered with protective keratin, so they are really tough customers.
But skin's evolution wasn't always about getting tough. Something soft was evolving on the skin of some dinosaurs. Feathers.
Feathers have a single shaft from which radiate filaments of keratin.
This is Sinosauropteryx, which shows a furry down of simple feathers. Because of the simplicity of these early feathers, scientists believe they evolved not for flight, but as insulation.
Feathers evolved as a skin structure, possibly, as is the case for fur, for insulation in small, ground-dwelling predatory dinosaurs.
Fossils have revealed the dinosaurs' armor and shown evidence of the first feathers on Earth. But in 2007, paleontologist Phil Manning was invited to study an incredible Triceratops fossil found in Wyoming.
I was contacted by a paleontologist, Peter Larson, who discovered a Triceratops. We know that this particular fossil is of a Triceratops because we have the beautiful three-horned skull at one end of the fossil.
Triceratops was the largest of the horned dinosaurs, measuring approximately 25 feet long and a whopping 10 feet in height. What made this find so special was something that had never been seen before: dinosaur skin.
And it was only when they started removing large tracts of the sandstone which was encasing this beautiful fossil that they discovered these large tracts of skin impressions, or what might have actual skin preserved on this amazing fossil.
Manning's excitement about this find's importance is palpable.
It's not like finding a few disjointed sentences which are hard to piece together to work out what they actually mean. Here we've got a full-blown paragraph, if not a whole chapter, which we can gently thumb through and understand so much about this particular animal's skin.
Powering up the electron microscope, Manning is about to take his first step toward cracking the skin sample's code. The view is an unprecedented trip back through time.
What you're actually looking at on the screen here is the surface of our fossilized skin. That's beautiful. You're looking at the surface of some Triceratops skin that's a little over 65 million years old, and that no one's ever looked at it in this resolution before.
This microscope allows Manning to see what elements are present in the fossil.
Where we haven't got elements identified, I can actually use the software in this machine to help identify the specific element. We've got silica, oxygen, carbon is present. That could be some of the plant remains that we find within this environment.
Some of the elements present in the skin fossil suggest some tantalizing ideas.
Ooh, manganese. I like manganese. Manganese is important.
Elevated manganese levels may indicate that the skin was fossilized in colder than expected conditions. As the clues are pieced together, a new window into the Cretaceous environment begins to emerge. But the biggest surprise is on the outside of the animal. They discover an enormous variety in the size, shape, and texture of the scales on the skin.
They're not small scales. These are quite robust, tough-looking scales.
A new, clear picture of Triceratops comes into focus.
Now, looking at the types of scales that we see on the skin on this particular Triceratops indicates that it didn't have a soft spot on its backside.
Manning finds tough scales that would protect this creature from its harsh environment. But surprisingly, there is no bony ossification. This animal would have little defense against a T-Rex bite. Triceratops lived toward the end of the dinosaurs' incredible 160 million year reign on Earth. Scurrying beneath the beast's lumbering feet were a different kind of animal. Warm-blooded mammals whose adaptive skin would change in ways that would allow them to grow and dominate the world as the dinosaurs had before them. Mammals lived for 160 million years in the shadow of the dinosaurs. They remained small and out of the way for a long time. But with the dinosaurs gone, there is new opportunity, and hundreds of new species evolve. And two amazing adaptations in skin ensure their survival almost anywhere.
Mammalian skin is different again from reptilian skin because mammals differ fundamentally in their physiological properties.
This physiological difference rests in the way the bodies regulate their temperatures. Reptiles are cold-blooded, so their body temperature depends on their surroundings. When it is cold, their body temperature dips. They become slow and sluggish. When it's warm, their body temperature rises. They are more active. Mammals, on the other hand, are warm-blooded. They maintain their own constant body temperature. This gives them an advantage in a climate with seasonal changes and extremes of hot and cold. But it also presents a challenge, because in the cold, warm-blooded mammals like us can freeze to death. As with the reptiles before, mammalian skin responds accordingly.
The skin of mammals has evolved over several million years to have certain properties, including marvelous outgrowths called hairs that protect the surface of the mammal and provide tremendous amounts of insulation.
Hair also guards against rubbing and abrasion, providing a lot of protection against routine wear and tear.
So as an animal's running through the forest or rolling on the grass or on the ground, it is completely protected.
The ancestors of mammals, sprawling reptilian creatures called synapsids, probably already had evolved hair. It is thought that hair began as a mutation on the skin, sprouting up in small spaces between the scales of creatures, like weeds in a brick path. A close-up look at a contemporary human hair reveals that while hair appears smooth, it's actually scaly, just like a reptile scale. It's why our hair can tease up and be tangled into a mess, and why it lies flat when combed in line with the scale's bias. Hair is formed in the lower dermal layer of skin and can easily regenerate. Mammals evolved a unique kind of skin, one that boosted its chances of survival. They now have a head start in exploring new terrains because their insulation enables them to travel long distances and adapt to different climates. But it's not just about staying warm. In some climates, it's about keeping cool. The elephant's tough skin and large barrel-shaped body retains a lot of heat.
In the course of evolution, the ancestors of elephants living in tropical environments really had to face the challenge of how to keep cool.
The elephant's skin evolved to enable a process that works just like a car's engine cooling system to beat the heat. Elephant ears, like two living car radiators, are built thin, stretched over cartilage packed full of blood vessels. And just like coolant arriving hot from the engine, hot blood circulates from the elephant's body into its ears, where it is cooled by its proximity to the open air. Ear flapping kicks up a breeze and boosts the cooling effect like a radiator's fan. And the elephant's blood, cooled by up to 10 degrees, is kept from overheating in the blistering sun. Frequent baths of water and mud help too. With heating and cooling systems in place, mammals are able to spread out over all 7 continents. But this isn't the only secret to the mammal's success. Skin in females goes through another remarkable transformation.
Without skin, we wouldn't have had mammary glands.
Female mammals develop the ability to lactate, passing nutrition to their young through skin.
Hey, buddy.
Biologist Catherine Hind studies lactation and its role in survival and behavior in a managed population of rhesus macaques on Cayo Santiago Island in Puerto Rico.
Rhesus macaques, like the ones on Cayo Santiago, typically nurse from 6 months up to about a year.
Mother's milk, delivered through the mammary gland, greatly improves the chances of a baby's survival by providing nutrients and antibodies that protect against diseases. The evolutionary roots of breastfeeding go back over 300 million years to the time of the strange reptilian creatures called synapsids, ancestors of mammals, and us, who laid eggs rather than carried their young.
Synapsids, 310 million years ago, evolved a mechanism for expressing fluids through their sweat glands that kept eggs moist.
Over subsequent millennia, the fluid that simply dripped from the skin like sweat grew richer and richer in nutrients. Today, there are only 3 species of egg-laying mammals called monotremes. The best known is the platypus, which, like the synapsids, lactates through pores in the skin. The skin has turned sweat into food.
The fact that modified sweat glands turn out to be milk-producing glands that actually feed mammalian young. This is a superb example of evolution.
In another lineage of mammals, mammals' milk grew richer, the delivery system more elaborate, until the familiar and successful combination of nutritious milk, breasts, and nipples was in place in almost every female mammal. Why do males have nipples? They develop in the embryo before gender is determined and remain ever after. Male nipples may be a useless adaptation, but for mammals, the female breast remains vital for survival.
The most important aspect of maternal care is lactation.
And Catherine Hind has learned that macaques use the time they are dependent on their mothers to learn vital lessons that could make the difference between life and death.
Mother's milk allows infants to learn about the world in which they're going to have to be adults while still being energetically protected by their mother. So while they get milk, they're able to learn how to process food, learn how to socially interact, and develop all the skills that they'll need in a complicated adult world.
The socialization encouraged by skin's evolution of breasts would blossom with the mammals that emerged close to 2 million years ago. Human beings. But humans did not retain skin like macaques. A new kind of skin evolved, unique among primates.
Humans have really different skin from any other creature.
All of a sudden, we have a very different kind of animal in equatorial Africa. Not an ape sitting or scurrying around near the shelter of trees, but an active, striding biped spending a lot of its time in open, hot environments.
The lion's coat, the gorilla's fur, none of it would be of use to humans. We needed to get naked, and we needed to keep cool. Humans were on the run, out of Africa and straight to the top of the food chain. Scientists now believe that what made it possible was a single evolutionary mutation in human skin. How did humans come to dominate all other mammals? Could the answer lie in the way the human skin evolves?
Humans have really different skin from any other creature.
Human skin is, of course, a barrier to the outside world. It protects our insides and is by far the largest organ in the human body. it is responsible for 1/6 of our body weight. In other words, if a 160-pound man were able to step out of his skin, he would lose more than 26 pounds.
It's hard to find important function in the body that skin doesn't have a role in.
Human skin, like all skin of animals with spines, is made up of 2 distinctive layers. The top one replacing itself completely over the course of 28 days, shedding 500,000 cells an hour. This churning mix of dead and live cells seals out water, dust, and germs.
It is a very, very specialized, unusual organ that is simple but deceptively complex.
Dan Lieberman is a professor of biological anthropology at Harvard University.
I study the evolution of the human body. I'm interested in why the body looks the way it does and how it got to be that way. Humans are most closely related to chimpanzees, and we know that the human and the chimpanzee lineages diverged sometime around 6 to 7 million years ago.
The last common ancestors to chimps and humans, hominids, lived in the tropical climates of Africa. They looked like chimpanzees, walking on all fours and covered in hair.
Sometime around 6 million years ago, hominids got up on 2 feet and became bipedal. And for millions of years, the earliest hominids were sort of bipedal chimps in a way.
Being able to stand upright and walk is only part of the human evolution story. As humans begin spreading out across continents, something else proves to be critical in the quest for domination: the ability to run.
The human lineage became more active, and they increased in stature and their levels of activity. Different physiological needs became apparent.
But what enables humans to be able to run in the first place? The answer lies with skin. Dan Lieberman and his team at Harvard examined why and how human beings evolved to run. And they believe the evolution of our skin played a big role in that change. Lieberman and his team demonstrate that at least 27 anatomical features on the human body evolved solely for running. To them, that is clear evidence that running is an extremely important part of what gave humans a big advantage. Most pronounced among these features, our large gluteus maximus, better known as the butt.
Humans have an enormous gluteus maximus. It's the largest muscle in the human body. If you were to look at a chimpanzee's rear end, you'd see it was very small, very, very pathetic. So, are you ready? I'm recording. When our subject was on the treadmill walking, you saw that not much is happening. She's not really sweating very much, and her trunk is very stable, and her gluteus maximus isn't firing very much. But when she starts running, she's falling. Every time she hits the ground, her body wants to fall forward. There go the gluteus maximi.
The powerful glutes kick into gear when we run to keep us from falling over, stabilizing the trunk and legs. For 4 million years, the ancestors of humans walked on 2 legs, and yet they didn't advance much beyond being bipedal apes. So walking is not what transforms the hominid body, but according to Lieberman, running could be.
It's still a mystery, of course, as to why humans became furless and sweaty, why we became naked. But we think, at least I think, that it happened because of thermoregulation and running.
Evolving features to run is not enough. The hominid body needed something else, a cooling system. Mammal skin had evolved hair to keep them warm in cold climates. Early hominids in Africa have the opposite problem. They need to be able to keep their bodies and brains from overheating. Ever able to adapt, the skin of humans and other mammals living in hot climates simply stopped producing so much hair.
We have, compared to other mammals particularly, we have skin that is got almost no hair.
Human skin would evolve to supply its own cooling bath in the form of sweat.
Sweating was essential in the progress of human evolution because it helped us maintain cool brains. The primate brain, if you heat it up even a few degrees Celsius above normal, it can't function properly. So how do you keep a primate brain cool? You basically sweat.
Mammals had long had sweat glands called apocrine glands that produce an oily liquid.
It's what causes a horse to lather or a pig to look sweaty.
It's this primitive sweat that creates our distinctive human body odor. But sometime, close to 2.5 million years ago, human skin began to produce a whole new kind of sweat composed almost entirely of pure, cooling water. The water came from a new kind of skin gland, the eccrine gland. Chimps and some other mammals do have eccrine glands, but only a few. Human skin has millions. Lieberman thinks this stunning explosion of cooling sweat glands in humans made them better hunters.
My bet is that what happened is that the hominids at some point started being more furless and started sweating, and then that enabled early hominids to hunt and run down animals.
How did running and sweating give the human hunter such an advantage?
We need to think of the differences between panting and sweating.
An animal cools down by panting, whereby it breathes shallowly over its tongue, which is filled with blood vessels. The blood gets cooled and sent back into the head and body of the animal. Compared to sweating, it is highly inefficient.
So that means that in the middle of the day, they tend to seek the shade, particularly in hot places like Africa.
They can also only pant while trotting, which means that an animal cannot cool down when it is galloping.
So if a human hunter 2 million years ago can make an animal run at a gallop, within 10 to 15 minutes, that animal will go into hyperthermia. It can't pant, and because it can't sweat, it gets too hot, and that will eventually kill the animal.
Most humans can run at a speed that is faster than the trot to gallop transition. So our early ancestors may have hunted by tracking an animal for miles, the first marathoners. They could force the animal to gallop for long distances, causing it to overheat in the blistering sun.
So the key adaptation for humans to enable us to do this persistence hunting is our skin. It's the ability to sweat and cool down by a mechanism other than panting.
The ability to sweat may have allowed humans to become the most successful and dominant predators on the planet. Now free to spread across the world, humans found once again their skin adapting to changing conditions.
Human skin doesn't come in just one color. It comes in a whole spectrum of colors, from the very darkest near ebony color to the very lightest near ivory color. This beautiful sepia rainbow of colors evolved as a product of natural selection.
Humans are remarkable because they have a wide variety of skin colors. Peoples that live in very sun-rich environments tend to have a lot of melanin in their skin because melanin helps protect from damage by the sun. By contrast, peoples that live in very sun-poor environments tend to have very little melanin, with the result that they have fairly light skin. It's controversial how much of human skin is adaptive versus how much is simply serendipitous as a result of chance.
Today, the environment is changing at a rapid rate, as it has done many times before. Animals all over the world, including us, will have to adapt or die. No one knows whether skin will be up to the challenge one more time.
Right now, animals living on the surface of the Earth are undergoing unprecedented environmental challenges, not only from global warming, but also because of a slow erosion of the ozone layer. Some animals can't even tolerate where they live, and they have to move to cooler places. So there is evolution of the skin occurring in these lineages that are being subjected to new evolutionary forces. But we don't know exactly what course this evolution will take.
Evolution happens over time, and any adaptive changes to skin may not emerge for hundreds or thousands of years. But if 400 million years of success is any guide, the organ we call skin will evolve.